everyone, welcome back to Film by KK. I'm Michaela with KK Films, and today we're going to talk about some camera basics. And when I say camera basics, we're talking about shutter speed, aperture, and ISO. All three components complement each other, and you cannot use one without using the other properly. Shutter speed controls so many different aspects of photography. Let's say you want to capture an image of someone running really fast and you want to stop that action. Having a high shutter speed, it opens it up and closes very, very fast, stopping the action so you can get a very crispy quality image. So I did film an example for you guys. I did shoot a picture of my sister doing jumping jacks so you guys can differentiate between a high shutter and a slow shutter. I shot this 1/125. So that's 125th of a second. As you can see, it's a little blurry, and you can definitely see that she's doing a jumping jack, but in her hand motions is blurry, right? So we want to get a more crispy, clean photo without any blur. So now let's boost it up to 1/1000 of a second, and you guys can definitely tell the difference on this one. So as you can see on this picture, it's stopping her action. She's in midair and it is really a clean cut photo. So you can definitely see how shutter speed comes into play when you're shooting faster motions. Now let's talk about aperture. Aperture controls how much light you let in, but it also controls what you see in the background. Now, if you're shooting a landscape, you want the aperture at a high number. I would say about an aperture of f8 or higher, because you want to get everything in the background very clear and very concise. So if you're shooting a portrait or a photo where you need a more shallow depth of field, simply meaning a blurry background, you definitely want to shoot at a lower aperture. That way it's letting in more light, but it's also blurring out the background and focusing more on your subject. So let's look at another picture of my sister for an example. Now on this picture, you can see that everything looks kind of in focus. You know, everything is clear, to the point. Everything looks good. So then I shot the same picture, but this time I set the aperture at a low number of f1.8. So that means that I let in more light, but also the background is more blurry and she's now more focused. So here's some more examples. I shot some pictures of my son's toy cars so you guys can see the difference in the aperture. Here's one shot with a high aperture, and here's the other one shot at a low aperture. Now let's talk about ISO. So ISO comes into play where you're in low lighting situations like indoors or outside or at night. If we don't have enough light, we'll turn up the ISO. The best way to describe it is like having artificial light. It's basically the sensitivity to the image sensor. If you're inside and you have your shutter speed where you want it, you have your aperture as wide as it can get, but you still need a little more light, you can turn up the ISO and add the artificial light to your photo or video, and it brightens it up. But keep in mind that the higher your ISO, the more noisy your image can get, or like pixelated. So what I would do is just research the camera that you have and check to see what's the highest, the ISO that you can use where you could still get a good quality image. Because I believe with my camera, it will be 800. Anything more than 800, after 800, it jumps up to 1600. So then my images start to get more grainy, more noisy, and that's definitely not good for business. It's not great quality. Now, if I had no choice but to bump up the ISO when I've already did my best with the aperture and the shutter speed, I would crank up the ISO on certain situations, but I would recommend bringing in more lights instead of cranking up the ISO, because again, it's not very sharp. It takes practice to get to master all three: shutter speed, aperture, and ISO. Again, they all work together to produce a quality image or video. It actually took me a little while to get familiar with my camera, to get familiar with everything. So, and I'm still learning, you know, but I have definitely grown in knowing camera basics, because you have to start at the basics before you can move up to a higher tier of videography, filmmaking, or anything that you're starting off. You have to learn the basics. So I hope I helped out in this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video.